Welcome to FinScale, a podcast created by Solène Niederkorn, shedding light on innovation in finance, banking, and insurance.
True Insights, layering the future of open banking. Francesco Simoneschi, co-founder and CEO of TrueLayer.
This is not just about, how you slice the pie, but also like how large is the pie, right? And we want this pie to go from somehow small to very, very large. And so the way that will happen is through large scale adoption.
A fantastic episode with one of the founders of TrueLayer, the solution that drives almost 30% of the year-on-year growth in open banking payments in the UK. I loved this interview with Francesco as he shared insights about their experiences and achievements in the open banking sector over the past 7 years, including their diverse range of solutions such as signup plus, payments, payouts, and VRPs, as well as their wide-ranging client base. This includes tech giants in the iGaming, e-commerce, and cryptocurrency sectors such as Coinbase, as well as more traditional merchants like the UK retailer Top Tiles. We explored their competitive positioning and their recent announcement regarding the launch of their payments platform program. We also delved into the potential avenues for growth, both in terms of geographical expansion and the diversification of their product offering. It's a market that continues to expand exponentially. Enjoy the show! Hello, everyone. Hi, Francesco.
Hello. Hi, Solène. Great to be on your podcast today.
Yes, it's truly a privilege for me to have you here. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. Actually, there are a lot of insights and perspective I'm eager to dive into today with you, but could you start by introducing yourself, please?
Absolutely. I'm Francesco. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TrueLayer. We are a payment network built on the back of open banking and account-to-account technologies. In a nutshell, we connect banks, businesses, and users to help them move money, pay for goods and services. We are trying to rebuild, if you want, a payment network from scratch using modern technology and take on some of the largest companies in the world and in this sector. Mm-hmm. And we are based in the UK. We started in 2016. We are a startup company, venture-baked. I've been working for pretty much like my entire career and life as a tech entrepreneur and also as an investor in technology startups. And I'm originally Italian. Came to the UK to really build TrueLayer on the back of changing regulations. And we have been good and I would say lucky to really be in the front row for really witnessing this open banking advancement in the market. And we are self-responsible for a large chunk of this volume of payments that we do initiate and facilitate. And so we have been incredibly excited to being some sort of like engine for growing this open banking economy. Mm-hmm. and almost like being pioneer in this space. Mm.
Yes, it's amazing what you've been building those 7 years. I guess the listeners are familiar with TrueLayer, but I think some might not necessarily know about all its beginnings. So could you explain to us how it all started, how you started this journey?
Yeah, I think as every startup, like we do have a story, and our story, I think, really starts many years ago, because I think like before TrueLayer as the company, there was Francesco and Luca. Luca is my co-founder and CTO of the company, and we know each other since we were very young kids in the high school in Rome. And we met and we kind of like hang out together because we shared a passion for computers. On top of course, like everything that a 14 years old would be interested in. And there's a lot of things that 14 years old are interested in. But among those, I guess we had software and building software. And we didn't know anything, but we were self-taught. And so it was really cool to, start working on some early open source projects with him and imagine what can you do by building software, by building application. And we kind of knew of those kind of success stories of Silicon Valley back then. And so I think like that was kind of the, I remember, Napster, for instance, like coming about back in the days. And we were super excited. Okay, like those kids in college building those sorts of applications that kind of goes and changed the world. And it was really, really relatable at that time. So, and that's how it really started, because we became not just friends, but business partners where we were 20 years old, and we built our very first company together, and then sold that business, moved to Silicon Valley, been there for several years. And that kind of gave us the opportunity to, be, first of all, like being exposed to everything that at that time was going on in the Valley in San Francisco, but also really mature into our kind of trajectory as tech entrepreneurs and understand like how does it work dealing with venture capital firms, like accessing capital, but also understanding the, how do you build large scale companies. And we have been lucky of, witnessing the early days of some other Silicon Valley companies. So I think like we brought everything together at some point. That was 2015 and then 16. And we knew that we wanted to work together. And I was at that time investing in B2B companies and of course, like fintech companies at that time was one of the, cool things that was happening in venture and in startups. And I came to the conclusion that a lot of innovation was happening on the front end side of financial technology. So, all the new cool apps that would kind of disrupt in a way the relationship between, traditional banks and consumers. So all the neobanks, all that good stuff. But at the same time, there was some sort of like untapped opportunity of building more like the B2B infrastructure that would enable all those disruptors of the front end side, like whether it was lending or banking or I don't know, money transfers, peer-to-peer, and so forth, right? And so I had this sorts of thesis, and that brought me to really look into, changing regulation as part of the forces that could transform industries. And one of those was happening in Europe. And that was really interesting because I'm Italian, right? So I feel, I look about myself as a European. And for many, many years, I thought, okay, Europe is really catching up to innovation, but is nowhere near, like the greatness of Silicon Valley and the abundance of ideas, talent, and capital. And I got fascinated. Okay, this is an interesting thing that is happening just in Europe. A regulation that basically tells banks, you need to go and build APIs, and those APIs needs to be useful for some pretty interesting activities, which is sharing financial data and making payments. As simple as that. And so with Luca, we not just like the business idea, but we really try to ask ourselves, you are a developer. You want to integrate with this sort of like new infrastructure that the regulation will at some point build, and how you do that, where you go. Is there going to be some sort of like, where is the power plug to get into this infrastructure? Is there going to be a developer friendly version of it? And so we came to the conclusion that maybe that was the Stripe, Twilio moments for bank APIs, and so we wanted to be a part of it, and so we packed our stuff and moved to the UK to set up TrueLayer, and I think we by and large we try to still today be really close to that source of initial vision of how do we make really, really easy for merchants, for software developers to connect to the underlying infrastructure of open banking.
And what was the first product you built?
So the first product we built, it was 2016. So open banking wasn't yet a reality per se. Like we had to wait another 2 to 3 years to even get the license going and the banks to really build their API. So we thought, okay, we are in the UK. We are a little bit like early. So the first thing, like this is going to be a play of scale. Like we need to reach scale as fast as we can. And so we thought, okay, let's try to basically offer the same service that open banking would give to financial innovators and financial apps, but just on whatever technology we can work on today. And so that ended up being some sort of like reverse engineering of banks' APIs and screen scraping, which is something that we saw happening in the US, but we knew that bank APIs, like those sorts of like technical interfaces that are actually designed to do, share transactional data and all that good stuff. We knew that we're coming about in 2018 and 19. And so eventually we made this switch, right? So the very first version was, how do we aggregate all those different interfaces and give like software developers in financial services easy access to those gateway to this source of gateway product, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was a pure infrastructure play to aggregate all the different banks initially in the UK, and then later on it was in Europe. And the primary use case at that time was something called account aggregation. So you will basically pull in all the different transactional data that consumers have with all their different banks, and then render it back as a just consolidated corpus of transactions, so that can be easily displayed for consumers to understand how much money do I have across my 3-4 different bank accounts, what are like the most common expenses, how can I group them together. So right now that seems like I think it's becoming more like table stakes for just like mobile banking in a way, but back then was still like territory for a lot of innovation, and so we were kind of feeding the data for those use cases, right?
On a B2B only, not B2C.
B2B, yeah. We always been B2B, and we continue to be, if you want, B2B2C, because there is an angle of consumers kind of like sharing their data, and we are somehow like the conduit in which like data and payments happen, but we certainly are a B2B company.
So you've been developing many other products. I'm thinking of a signup plus, payments, payouts, and variable recurring payments. Could you please illustrate a few of them with existing clients, because you have beautiful clients. I've seen Coinbase or Kazumo in iGaming. So yes, illustrate a few of those typical use cases for the audience to really understand currently what is the offering and how to use your services and your solutions.
Sure. So what we're building is a payment network, right? So that means that there are different actors in this network. There are the banks, there are the merchants, and there are consumers, right? And so they all need to, I guess, like pay each other, like consumers buying services and products from merchants, and then like banks, of course, like being the place where consumers have their money to be spent, right? So we kind of cater for all those different sides of the network, and therefore that means that this network has multiple endpoints and modalities, if you want, in which like you can get fruition of value, which in our world then makes up all the different products, right? And so we try to add value into very specific moments where consumers and businesses want to transact together, whether that is onboarding flows or getting paid or pay the businesses, right? So at conceptual level, like the easiest to understand is a user that wants to pay a business. And then you made the reference to Coinbase, for instance, or maybe Revolut being another example of that, or I don't know, Top Tiles in, I don't know, e-commerce space, but there's several, right? And so it's easy to understand because you're a user, you are on their checkout pages, or in case maybe of Coinbase, you are topping up your Coinbase account. And so what you want to do is to basically link up your bank account directly to this merchant, to this financial app, and move money seamlessly from your bank account into maybe Coinbase account, right? And so to that extent, like we work as maybe replacement or competitor of whether it's a PayPal or Visa and MasterCard. So it's another option to basically move money. For consumers, I would say in many cases end up being a more seamless experience because it uses biometrics authentication and everything happens through the mobile banking app of their bank. So they don't have to input any detail or password or card number or account number or any of those details, right? So it's a very streamlined and secure consumer experience. And on the other side, you're the merchant, and there are some benefits of being on our network, whether it's getting money to be immediately settled and being immediately available, as well as like managing risk in a way more effective manner, no chargebacks, and also I would say that boils down to be a better ROI. So I like to say this is not about being cheaper. This is more about having a better return on investment. Like this is getting more value for the same price. But I would say by and large also like for businesses that end up being a more efficient way to get paid, right? And then there are other moments where we are adding value. A good example could be signup plus. Signup plus is basically payments meet onboarding. So you are a business and you want to onboard customers more efficiently. Make an example, maybe you're a sport betting app and you just acquired a consumer and you want them to immediately deposit in the merchant account. And so you have two problems. Like the first problem is how do you quickly onboard and KYC and EML check that consumer? On the other side, how do you receive payment, right? And so we kind of like joined those two things, those two moments together, like the ability of signing up, sharing identity data, and also make a payment. So it is effectively, from a consumer perspective, it's a way to completely compress the time to value into moving money from their bank account into the merchant account, by at the same time like having the security and sharing like the identity data that allows the merchant in turn to onboard them safely and in a very streamlined way. And also a few other examples of ways you can get in fruition of our network. Payouts. This is the other way around. Like this is a business that needs to remit money back into consumer accounts. And we want to do that safely and efficiently and in real time, because it's so important for consumers to, I would say, have this source of real time instantness feeling when they are dealing with their product and services. And you were mentioning Kazoo. Kazoo is a prime example here in the UK of maybe a very, very specific way of thinking about e-commerce. Like you're buying and you are sometimes like selling also large, like your car, which is kind of a large purchase. And so in Kazoo example, you're a seller, you're basically selling your car to Kazoo, and there is this sort of weird moment where somebody is picking up your car and exiting your driveway with your car, and you still need to get paid. So yes. Kazoo is removing that sort of little anxiety of how fast I'm going to get my money. And the beautiful of that is that by the time like they are picking up your car, you already received the push notification from your bank that the money has been paid to you like instantly. And that is really, really powerful, and is really, really powerful in a variety of different industries. Think about even like refunds in e-commerce, like how important it is to get from a consumer experience perspective, how important it is to get your money back immediately the moment that a refund is issued or a return is kind of issued. And so we empower, facilitate through our payment network all those different use cases. And so, and in the future now, there are other modalities that we are exploring, like for the more, like, I would say, the one that are in the nitty gritty of how this regulation work. There is something coming up which is called variable recurring payments, which kind of allows us to connect more permanently a bank account to a merchant, and so then have basically some sort of like card on file experience. So you can cater to subscription payments or variable payments over a period of time. And so removing friction, but just keeping the, I would say, like the basics of account payments and open banking, where it's cheaper, faster, efficient for the merchant, no chargebacks, all that good stuff.
Thank you very much for taking the time to explaining us all those use cases. You mentioned the UK retailer Top Tiles that is integrating open banking as a payment method for online and offline, I mean, on stores. What are the pros and cons for that kind of integration for brick and mortar retail?
Yeah, I would say, I think like the main driver of all those businesses, and we see many right now starting to be really interested into open banking, account. I think like it all starts with two different ways of thinking about this way of paying. Like one is around, can I get better value for the the amount of money I'm spending on payment processing, and then usually leads to analyze all the cost involved with refund, chargebacks, and all the other I would say costs that PSPs are adding on top, right? So the first reason is, can I effectively get better value for processing my payments? And then the other one is consumer experiences, right? So how can I delight my consumer with something that is easier for them? And I think Top Tiles being an example, but there are many others where they have basically different purchase experiences. Some of that are delayed purchases, like I basically get an invoice, or I'm buying like a number of, in this case, like piece of furnitures or construction materials, and now I need to remit and pay this invoice in a seamless way. And usually that is already done with a bank transfer, right? And so how do I streamline that whole experience? I would say the drawback in general, not just for retailers, but I think like several businesses, is that this is still fairly new for consumers. It is pretty natural for a consumer to say, I want to pay with my bank account, because the reality is that the vast majority of consumers, they're not aware of who is Visa, MasterCard, and in many cases, they're not even aware of, PayPal or Apple Pay or Android Pay. Like they just understand that they have money in their bank account, and somehow in different ways they can get the merchant paid. And so the concept in itself is not that different. But of course, like the experience in itself of connecting your bank account, it is something new. And many consumers are going through this for the first time. So I would say there is the drawback for many merchants to kind of like introduce something that will feel a little bit new and innovative. I have to say, we are getting to a point where, for instance, in the UK, several million users, like more than I think like 10 million users, used open banking in the last 12 months. So it's becoming a fair share of the population, really growing really fast. So I guess this problem will sort out itself
in the coming years.
Because of course, like consumers will get more familiarity, but there is a little bit of like kind of cold start problem of this whole kind of ecosystem, right?
Clearly. Okay, thank you. There is one program you recently announced, the payments platform program. I wanted just to stop a little bit on this, and maybe can you explain to us what is the intention of this program and how it will drive your growth? Because you already have like 40% of open banking payments in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. So how will that program support the growth of TrueLayer in UK, in Europe, and outside of Europe?
Yeah, and I think you said something interesting. Like we are 40% of the volume and number of transactions that are processed in the UK. I would say also in many other countries we are a very, very high share, like market share. However, this is not just about like how you slice the pie, but also like how large is the pie, right? And we want this pie to go from somehow small to very, very large. And so like the way that will happen is through large scale adoption. And so it's incredibly important that we do collaborate and we create partnership with some of the companies, like the best companies in the world in payments, that already are working with a very large selection of merchants. And so merchants are super important because they are the one that are kind of onboarding themselves on the payment network that we are building. And so we absolutely want and need to work with this large panel of payment companies and payment platforms to reach their merchants and allow, I would say, their merchant to have the convenience of just turning on our payment network without going through a more like sophisticated integration or direct integration. And look, like we love both, and we always like leave the merchant to just like decide what is good for them and their setup. Like if they want to integrate directly with us, or they want to go through their different set of partners and payment service providers, that's completely up to them. But I think it's so important for us to remove friction and make sure that merchant will always have the most suitable option for them to integrate with our network, right? And so we said like payment service provider, I guess that's one side. The program itself also gathered to e-commerce plugin. I don't know. I think about the Magento, the WooCommerce, Shopify is also like another great example of that. We are building an ecosystem, right? And so we need to. It's just not about us, but I think like it's about how is that our merchants and our customers will find the most convenient integration pathway. And this is something that we have been developed for years at this point, right? And so at some point we just like felt the need of saying we need to almost like find a good name for something that we are kind of like doing and it's kind of happening naturally, and formalize it into a program that we could run and just like extend it to many more partners.
And you have partners like Stripe, Tunes, and Nuvei. What are the criteria that you use to determine these partnerships, and what makes possible for Stripe to be available on your program?
Yeah, I would say like we are increasingly working with more and more, and we are not trying to pick one over another. Sometimes it's very contingent on, namely, is there a pool of merchants that is driving demand for integrating with a set partner. Or there is a strategic reason why that is important to happen, because we both want to enable maybe a specific cohort of customers to integrate with our network. So there could be very different reasons. I would say by and large, I think both ourselves and our partners, we always optimize for what the end customer wants, which is the merchant, right? And so in general, I would say whenever there is strong merchant pool, I think like we certainly want to partner and work together and make sure that we remove friction away. And so in the future, you will see more and more partners to be announced. And this is, and I do invite, I would say, everyone that is building in a payment company or is building a payment platform like to just reach out if they are interested into this specific program. But in general, like this is open and available to pretty much everyone. Like and so it's more like maybe tactically a matter of time, but like more names will continue to be announced. We don't necessarily make any sorts of like preference of one or another. We just want to work with like the best companies building and operating in payments at the moment.
There are actually in the domain of payments and infrastructure in general, huge competition, and particularly in the e-commerce space. So how do you ensure that you still offer value proposition compared to your competitors? And what is your USP?
Sure. I would say the easy answer is, and I think like, if I remember correctly, I think one of the, I don't know if Patrick Collison said at some point, like the best product roadmap is to just simply do whatever your customers are asking you to do. And I think like by and large that is kind of like the secret here. Like we are incredibly focused on creating like positive customers outcomes. And so I think like it's an incredibly tactical way of thinking of what are like the small increments of value that will enable our customers to be successful. And I believe that the world in which like we do operate, which is financial technology and payments, it is a lot about incremental improvements. It's a lot about building the inside of the infrastructure, increasing most often conversion rate. And so are all those kind of like little details and small details will matter. So we're incredibly focused on that. So where is our unique value proposition? I would say it really depends where you are comparing us, who are you comparing us against. I would say there are ways we compete with maybe card processing, some other times with other account-to-account competitors. And so for each and every one, I would say we have different ways to be, I would say, ahead of the pack, ahead of the competition. But everything comes from this kind of view of merging what is more, I would say, what is like the latest and greatest of payment innovation. I'll make an example like variable recurring payment, VRP, is something that we're really spearheading. And so I would say, yes, it's continue to really build the future and making the future available to our customers. But at the same time, we really need to be incredibly customer focused and understand, this future needs to be declined and implemented into something that solves their current pain points. And so removing friction, increasing conversion rate, don't misrepresenting also I would say like the viability of certain things. Let's be clear. I'll make an example. PSD2 has been implemented in a variety of ways in Europe, and some really good, some other not really good, right? And I think there has been a moment in the market where everybody were kind of like a little bit misrepresenting the capabilities of PSD2, and they were going to merchants and say, like, this will seamlessly work everywhere in Europe, completely the same. And reality is that several years later, it's still like a little bit fragmented, and we are incredibly open and transparent with our customers to say, look, this will work, this will not work, and we're working on it, right? And I think like building this trust and transparency for us is incredibly important, and that's why I believe we have such a outstanding reputation in the market, because we try to speak the truth.
Good. So you very nicely introduced my last question. I was thinking of the go-to-market strategy, taking into consideration the local nuances and all the difference you mentioned in Europe, because you're already present in Germany, in France, Italy, UK, of course. So how do you consider this?
Sure. It's a very complex and nuanced question where I think the way we approach this is we do a lot of research. So it's some sort of like top-down view of the market, and it's a lot of like data-orientated set of data points and dimension that we take in consideration. To make an example, one like North Star is certainly like conversion. Like, can we give the right conversion rate to the right set of merchants for a specific country? And if that it's hard to happen, then of course, like that is a big factor that we will keep in consideration, right? We want to offer something that solves a real merchant problem, not just like, again, a little bit like smoke and mirrors. And trust me, this industry, I think, like has been a little bit like pestered by a lot of like smoke and mirrors in the last several years. So I think like we need to be real and pragmatic. On the other side, I think like there are many other aspects, like for instance, the cultural aspect of, are account-to-account payments already prevalent in a specific geography or not? How fast are they growing? Are the settlement rails real-time already or not? And so you need to analyze all of that, and also a little bit like the size of the market as well. And so we usually end up, and we keep changing kind of like what is the list of countries or verticals even that we want to focus on, knowing also that we need to focus on something, right? Like we can't just simply do everything. And so sometimes are very hard decisions that we need to make, but we want to make sure that we don't dilute or focus over a surface that becomes too large. And so while keeping this focus, we are kind of like ruthlessly optimized for where we do think that we are gonna really have a needle mover. And then once that is decided, then we mobilize. And we are also trying to be patient. Some of those initiatives and strategic objectives are like you need to wait. Payments is an interesting kind of market and industry where you will see the benefits of scale in an incredible way, but you need to wait for that scale to happen, right? And so you need to take a very, very long view into and have a high level of conviction and be able to see and weigh the results of your work, because it will take a lot of time. Like it will take you building the right infrastructure, bringing it to market, having your first customers, and then scaling with your customers and integrating and solving like more problems. So it's really like a very long journey, and you need to have the patience of backing up your conviction with strong data and do the right things.
Yeah. So where do you see the biggest opportunity? I mean, geographically, but also in terms of product in the coming years?
If I just zoom in Europe, I think it's very interesting. There is certainly like a fragmented view of account to account, and different ways different countries are adopting account to account. So the good news is that in general, I think account to account is happening in Europe. You have maybe countries like the Netherlands with Swish that has been there for a very long time, and countries like France that for the very first time are seeing account to account kind of like starting to work, but it's really the very early stages of that development. And so I'm incredibly bullish on France, Germany, and Spain. They are, I think, by and large, they're basically doing what the UK has done, just like with a delay of a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, where they are basically setting up instant payments among like the largest banks, and then you have a user experience based on biometrics, which like increases conversion rate pretty dramatically. In Germany, you have a culture of account to account as well, and so that really helps as well. So I'm really bullish on those 3 countries as core PSD2 geographies, right? And then there are also the verticals, like what are the subsector of e-commerce that are more like ready for account-to-account payments. And in general, like we see strong kind of customer pool coming from food delivery, fast fashion, luxury goods, travel industry. So those are, I would say, for us, like those are some of the industries that we have in our focus. And when we see the largest amount of industry engagement and where we are extremely bullish on how they will use open banking to again try to serve their customers in the best possible way.
Okay, good luck for the journey. Yes, just to conclude, I ask my guests to a recommendation of a book. So what would you recommend today?
So I'm a little bit old school, I guess. And one book that I think as a CEO and founder, but in general as a leader of a company, kind of like helped me or change the way I approach the entire matter is a book called Principles by Ray Dalio.
Of course.
Like
yes.
I'm not saying like anything really, really new here, but it's an incredible book. And I think like, just like the description of very different kind of behaviors and situations end up being incredibly real and incredibly helpful. So strongly recommend, but I'm sure like probably many
not so much recommended on my podcast, and I might say it's sort of Bible for me. So but not so much recommended.
I know, and it's the same at TrueLayer. Like we always have like a couple of spare copies in our little library. People makes jokes and fun of me at sometimes, like because I'm a little bit like a zealot of Ray Dalio. But apart from that, like I really love the intellectual caliber of the book and the person really.
And he launched the app. I also have the app Principles on my iPhone.
Absolutely. But I would say let's start with the book, and then like if you get into that sort of rabbit hole, then you start like scorecarding, like interaction and all that. But like that is a more advanced kind of stage, right? But I would say start with the book. It's very solid. And then like if you become a fan, then there's a whole world as you're saying.
Thank you, Francesco, for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been really lovely to speak with you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you all for listening and sharing this moment with us. Don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn to share your comments and reactions. You can also rate this episode on your favorite podcast platform. See you soon.